Rotom is always Electric and Ghost in Gen 4, even when it changes into its appliance forms. It does not become Electric and Water when it's Rotom Wash, it doesn't become Electric and Fire when it's Rotom Heat, always Electric and Ghost. The difference is, of course, the respective signature move on each form. But it's not always clear which form you want to use, not just for their respective signature moves, necessarily, because Rotom doesn't always fit those signature moves on its movesets, but which one you want to bluff. Now, there is the rare occasion where it doesn't matter, because against an experienced player, you are not fooling them at all. The most prominent example has always been Rotom, Resthawk Rotom on stall teams, with Will-O-Wisp, Resthawk, and Shadow Ball or T-Bolt. And there, you are not fooling anyone into thinking you have Overheat as Rotom Heat, or Hydro Pump as Rotom Wash. That team composition gives you away way too much. And, like, even if you do, like, actually, you're not, even if you do have Hydro Pump or Overheat or whatever, it's like, okay, so that's a Resthawk or a bulkier Rotom on such a stall team with Hydro Pump or Overheat. Good, I'm glad it wasn't the Resthawk set that would actually be a problem, you know? So, it's much safer to be wrong in such a situation. But yeah, so that's why on sometimes on stall teams you'll see Resthawk Rotom that is a Rotom Fan or a Rotom Frost or a Rotom Mow. Back in the day we called it Rotom Cut, which was cooler, but whatever. Even CTC, you know, agrees. You know, he's in the cut. He's Rotom C. So for a second I was like, did we really used to do that? And then, you know, I was validated by the Great One. Anyway, so most of the time you are not going to be... It's not going to be totally irrelevant which form you choose, though. If you're running Resthawk on a bulky team, yeah, go for Rotom Frost because it's cool. No one's ever going to think you have Blizzard. So the question here is more, you know, for those situations where you might want to bluff a certain move and how you choose which move you want to bluff. So it's not really the most impactful thing, but it is something to consider. And also in this is when to choose a certain signature move to actually use it. So we'll keep things simple. Rotom Fan, Rotom Frost, and for the most part, unfortunately, Rotom Mow really don't factor into this equation. Now, I will say some words on Rotom Mow because I actually think it's quite good. But Fan and Frost, no. Technically, you could see some use for Rotom Frost, right? Like, I do think it could do some cool stuff with Blizzard, but at the same time, it's not really part of the metagame, so we're not going to go into... You know, I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking it's better than it is. It's very unproven, and for good reason. I mean, Blizzard accuracy is terrible, and, you know, generally Rotom gets fine by fine with HP Ice. And for the most part, that does apply to Rotom Mow, although Leaf Storm is a little better because immediately threatening Swampert and hitting T-Tar harder initially is quite good. So I do think there's a place for that, but again, not really proven. So for the most part, when you're choosing between the signature moves themselves, you are choosing between Rotom Heat's Overheat and Rotom Wash's Hydro Pump. Now, the default for years is Rotom Wash, whether or not you have Hydro Pump. Because if you have Hydro Pump, or sorry, if you are Rotom Wash and you want a signature move, Hydro Pump is generally the best one, right? And if you don't, even if you don't have Hydro Pump, then on a lot of sets, it's best for the opponent to think that you do because it is the best move. So the answer to your, if your question is, I don't know which one to pick, then if you want to be safe, just go with Wash. You cannot go wrong with Wash. So when do you pick Overheat? Well, it's pretty much only on Scarf. I mean, again, I like to deep dive into Pokemon and say, oh, this could be viable, but like, make no mistake, you are not going to be seeing, you know, Blizzard Rotom Frosts and Leaf Storm Rotom Mows in high-level DPP. And so for the same reasoning, while you could theoretically see a non-Scarf Overheat Rotom Heat, you are not going to most of the time. If you run a Scarf Rotom, then sometimes you do want Overheat. And the reason is that sometimes you need instant damage on Metagross and Jirachi. Agility Metagross, especially because a lot of offensive teams that anchor on Rotom Heat, they are going to be one of their best answers to an Agilagross, whether late game or in general. Especially if the water type gets overwhelmed dealing with something else like a dragon or a T-Tar or an Infernape or what have you. So you are going to... well, yeah, Rotom does generally resist Agilagross's attacks. They don't run Zen Headbutt very much. Ice Punch doesn't do too much damage. But it's a Scarf Rotom. It's not going to have a ton of bulk. You know, if there's like rocks and sand in the picture, it's going to get worn down really fast. And sometimes you need to be able to actually hit Metagross really, really hard. And that's where Overheat comes in. It's got some other use as well. The Jirachi threatening is really nice, of course. You are also... This was more useful, arguably, when Shaman was still a big metagame presence, or even something like Venusaur. So there's that. But even just being able to threaten Breloom with an OHKO, as opposed to HP Ice, which comes up quite short, is really nice. I do generally like Overheat on Scarf a lot, just because the fire coverage tends to help Rotom do its job as a revenge killer more, whereas Hydro Pump doesn't have as many revenge killing targets. Hydro Pump's main use on Scarf is preventing it from getting pursued by T-Tar, but it's still not super reliable at that because it doesn't hit that hard. And it's not like you're going to be getting into a lot of endgames against Scarf Heatran either, where Hydro Pump lets you beat it a lot more easily. So generally, I do tend to lean Overheat over Hydro Pump on Rotom Wash, but it's not that simple. First of all, Hydro Pump Scarf Rotom Wash is still great. Second of all, not every Scarf Rotom is going to choose between Overheat and Hydro Pump. So think about it like this. You're always running T-Bolt, and then you are filling up the other three with, besides Overheat or Hydro Pump, Shadow Ball, Hidden Power Ice, Trick, Will-O-Wisp. Those are most of what you're going to be running. You know, I'm restraining myself from going into, you know, super fringe options. Well, you could technically run so-and-so. But yeah, so, you know, 3 slots for more than 3 moves. So sometimes you are going to, like, I have always been a big fan of HP Ice Will-O-Wisp Trick. Will-O-Wisp on Scarf is very good for a lot of reasons. HP Ice's coverage I find harder and harder to go without, you know, over time. I mean, D-Knight and Flygon are just so dangerous. And, you know, the coverage against grasses is great as well. But, yeah, even hitting something like Zapdos harder. And also hitting Latias without necessarily having to Shadow Ball. Because Shadow Ball is obviously a great cleaning option, and is very good for Gengar in particular. It's just hard to fit at times, because you also really want Trick, and yeah. So in the event that you are running a Scarf Rotom with T-Bolt and then 3 of Shadow Ball, HP Ice, Trick, Will-O-Wisp, you know, and you don't have room for Hydro Pump or Overheat because you've decided both moves' targets are not as important as the targets of HP Ice or Shadow Ball, Trick, you know, Wisp. Generally, Scarf Rotom is almost never without Trick, by the way. I mean, it has been done, and it is fine all, but Trick is a big part of what makes it so good as a Scarfer, because it can still threaten defense, right? So realistically, it's not fitting, you know, 3 moves in 3 slots. It's realistically fitting 2 moves in 2 slots. So, even harder to get a Hydro or Wisp in there, or Overheat in there. So, if you want to bluff, which one are you bluffing? Well, both are, again, this does not have a really concrete answer. It more depends on your team, and it also depends on, well, yeah, it's pretty much your team and your preference. Again, this is not really going to be like a regular game breaker, but it is one of those fine details of the tier that is good to keep in mind. So, like, even just, I remember I've been able to win games that were otherwise going to be major uphill struggles because I was able to overheat Magnezone with Rotom, for example, because Magnezone can absorb a Scarf Rotom's other moves to prevent Clefable from getting tricked or whatever. But with Overheat, you take that away, and I think that's a major, major benefit. So I am really partial to Overheat. So in such a vein, I would say that generally it's because you're not going to get into a lot of situations. Because if a T-Tar is going to pursue a Scarf Rotom, generally it's not going to be in a range where Hydro Pump is going to make a massive difference, unless you play incredibly well. But that really depends. Or if your team is really fragile against DD Tar and you need the extra smack against it, for example, that would also be fine. Also, Hydro Pump just has general good coverage and is roughly as strong as Stab Shadow Ball, so it's not a bad move to have and just throw around. But yeah, I would say that it's something to keep in mind. But my personal preference, I don't want to impart this as some sort of truth, is that I like bluffing Overheat a little bit more, because I find, since Overheat's targets are more game-changing, as that, that Jirachi, that Metagross, that Breloom, I find that being able to bluff that can generally be more valuable than bluffing Hydro Pump. So, I mean, of course, bluffing Hydro is great too. You can send it in against a 40% Heatran, and then act like you have it, and proceed from there, and put that in their heads. Whereas if you send in Rotom Heat in that situation, then they know you don't have it. So it really depends on how your team deals with each targets. And there's reasoning out there where some people say no, you should always bluff Hydro Pump if you don't have. I mean, I don't agree with that, but you should always bluff Hydro Pump because it's more impactful against the Pokemon that are commonly paired with Rotom. I mean, like, let's say you send in Rotom against an Infernape, right? And you want to revenge kill it. First of all, Hydro Pump lets you actually revenge kill a Rotom, an Infernape at high health, right? That's already big. Because at high health, Infernape can just stay in, take a T-Bolt, and take a Rotom out in return, right? So not only does Rotom having Hydro Pump let you take Infernape out in one shot from high health, but it also lets you super effectively smack a T-Tar that might be coming in, so it's even harder to revenge kill since Infernape is so commonly paired with T-Tar. So if you feel like you will need that Infernape, Heatran, T-Tar hit, as well as hitting something like Flygon trying to come in, or even smacking Gliscor can be big if you can't fit HP Ice. That's another big target for HP Ice, why I'm a big fan of it. Then yeah, Hydro Pump's fine. But if you find your team wanting that extra security against grasses and Overheat, then pretty much the same one you try to bluff is the same one that you think your team would be better off against. Again, not an exact science, but yeah. That's for Scarf Rotom alone, of course, because Scarf Rotom is a big metagame presence. So Scarf, let me help out with the visual part here. Yeah, so Scarf Rotom alone, whether it's offensive Scarf or bulky Scarf or something in between. Sometimes Rotom can be max HP or max speed and special attack. And then a set that was really popular for a while was max HP and max speed, or maybe you drop the speed a little to outrun something like D-Knight at +1, or something in between. Because if I remember correctly, 136 special attack outrun or KO's bulkless Dragonite with HP Ice after Stealth Rock always. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, let me toy with these EVs a little bit. So if you want some bulk, then you can do something like this. And then, this last slot, Will-O-Wisp messes with T-Tar for the benefit of a teammate. And it's just generally nice in general. Another big thing Overheat hits is Lucario. Because Scarf Rotom is very often a Lucario check on offense. That's one of things that makes it good, but like with Infernape, in a one-on-one, if Lucario is healthy, then it is going to take that T-Bolt, and while it crunch is rare, but a +2 Ice Punch is not going to be too appreciated either. So sometimes if you really want to force that issue, Overheat. Will-O-Wisp is also good for that, of course, but sometimes you want Overheat to be more forceful against an Agility Metagross that very well might be carrying Lum, because you can't always trick everything and be done with it. Sometimes you got to have that outright damage. So, why is... Oh, it's... I messed up the EVs. Come on, click. There we go. Anyway. So, yeah. As for other sets, so we're not going to do an extreme deep dive into every possible Rotom variant. You know, Colbert, you know, HP Ice, Paint Split, Wisp. I love that set back in the day. It's really good. But generally, if you are going to run a non-Scarf Rotom, Wash is a safer bet because, and this is big, sub-split variants of Rotom. So let me actually show this visually. So sub-split variants of Rotom, or not even sub-split necessarily, but sub-variants of Rotom in general, whether they're, you know, sub... Like, I'm not going to go over every single sub-Rotom variant because there's a lot, but just for example's sake, we're going to go sub, T-Bolt, Pain Split, and then the last move, we're not going to take Charge Beam into account because it's very rare, and for good reason, it's not that good. But sub, T-Bolt, Pain Split, then that last is either Will-O-Wisp, Shadow Ball, or, you guessed it, Hydro Pump, whether it's Lefties or Life Orb. So since sub Rotom, whether Lefties or Life Orb, or, you know, another item, if you want to run Colbur Berry or, you know, Magnet or whatever, then since such a set would feasibly run Hydro Pump, then you are better off bluffing that you have Hydro Pump before you reveal your full moveset so that your opponent takes the possibility into account. Whereas if you have Overheat and they know you're not Scarf, then they're like, oh, I already know the fourth move. You know, it's, again, not a major game-breaking thing, but these little details are often bigger than we think in a battle itself. So if you are running a yeah. Also, if you're running Spectrotom, then you are running Hydro Pump because it eviscerates T-Tar. So Spectrotom, that one's easy. You just always Hydro Pump. You don't take Hydro Pump off Spectrotom. But if you're running, you know, non-Scarf, non-Specs, non-Rest Hawk Rotom, then, you know, so feasibly some subset, or I mean, you can take the sub off the sub-split set and still have a, you know, really good Pokemon. You can run T-Bolt, Shadow Ball, Pain Split, and Will-O-Wisp, for example. Or you could fit Hydro Pump in there, or HP Ice, or so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so. Yeah, so there's that. Oh, and this sounds like a joke, but it is actually a really good set and has been used in tournament play to good success. Sometimes Rotom Wash even uses of course he uses Hydro Pump. He even uses Rain Dance. And as soon as you show Rotom Heat in that situation, then they know you're not Rain Dance. And so yeah, generally, I mean, on all occasions, you could just use Rotom Wash all the time and not realistically be any worse for it. So it's going to mostly be a choice of, do I want to Rotom Heat or Rotom Wash or Rotom Heat on Scarf? Do I want either of their signature moves, and which one do I bluff if I don't? So that's the major debate. I mean, look, some people used to like sub Will-O-Wisp, Pain Split, T-Bolt, Rotom Heat, but you know, it was not as... It didn't bluff the possibility of Hydro, so it was... I mean, it wasn't meaningfully worse, of course. But as soon as you see leftovers, you're like, yeah, that Rotom does not have Overheat. I mean, just because it's so hard to realistically fit into a moveset. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done. I would, you know, welcome seeing lefties Overheat Rotom. But it's very... I've messed around with it before. And you can pretty much just run T-Bolt, Will-O-Wisp, Pain Split, and then, oh, there's Overheat in the last slot. Or T-Bolt, HP Ice, Will-O-Wisp, Overheat. Kind of like a Scarf set, but, you know, without the trick and without the Scarf, obviously. So T-Bolt, Shadow Ball, HP Ice, Overheat. Yeah, that's probably a fine Rotom set for general utility. You know, you can slot in HP or Will-O-Wisp over Shadow Ball there to still annoy bulky Latias, while also being better guarded against T-Tar. I mean, it's fine. It's going to help you against things like Trick Room, Bronzong, and Agility Metagross, and actually being able to hit Jirachi for big damage, and Breloom, of course. It's just not a very common one, whereas... Yeah, so, okay, I'll stop there, because I've already got on longer than I expected. So, thank you. Oh, I guess I also forgot that sometimes Rest Talk Rotom can run Discharge over T-Bolt, but yeah. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. Oh, wow. Yeah, just got excited by Rotom. If you have any questions on Rotom sets, feel free to ask in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you next time.